I speak the language, and it's
Mm-hmm.
generally a comfort area in my head. But in my first attempt, I think I just relied on my gut
Mm-hmm.
instinct, my feel for the language. And in my second attempt, I realized like that is not enough. In this attempt and in this preparation, sort of over the last couple of months, that actually having that method based approach to each of these
Mm-hmm.
problems is essential. So I would say that would be my biggest key takeaway.
Oh.
I guess this time, apart from my process, my whatever, like the preparation over the 2 months, I think a mindset shift as well. But the idea is to let the framework reach you to an answer and let your gut back up that answer
Mm-hmm.
rather than leading with your gut. So I think just that entire process of review, rework, review again, rework again. It's iterative, but
Mm-hmm.
it fixes your fundamentals in a very logical manner.
So, hi Gautam, welcome today to the video debriefing session. Thank you for taking your time out today, and a big congratulations on your 740 in the recent GMAT attempt.
Thanks so much, Rashmi. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So, we are here to talk about your journey and how you made it to the top of GMAT today. But before we get into the details, if there's a key takeaway that you have from this journey, it would be great for you to share that with our viewers.
So, like I said earlier, I think like boiling it down to one key takeaway is challenging. But for me, at least on a personal level, I would say it was my approach towards the verbal section. I was
Mm-hmm.
always kind of comfortable with verbal because I speak the language, and it's
Mm-hmm.
generally a comfort area in my head. But in my first attempt, I think I just relied on my gut
Mm-hmm.
instinct, my feel for the language. And in my second attempt, I realized like that is not enough because the
Mm-hmm.
GMAT actually lays traps for you. It knows what are spoken English mistakes that happen, which in theory are not correct and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. So I realized in this attempt and in this preparation, sort of over the last couple of months, that actually having that method based approach to each of these
Mm-hmm.
problems is essential. So I would say that would be my biggest key takeaway.
Oh, awesome. So we'll talk about that in great detail. But just to give our viewers an insight, could you just give us a little bit about your background? What did you study? What do you do? And how does GMAT fit into the larger scheme of things for you going ahead?
Sure, sure. So I did economics at Ashoka University,
Mm-hmm.
which is a little outside Delhi. Post that, I've been working now for about 4.5 years,
Mm-hmm.
largely in the impact sector space, the development sector. So I started in the policy space, working with members of parliament, working in tech policy. So that was over the last two, three
Mm-hmm.
years. And now I work with a non-profit, which is focused on addressing malnutrition. It's partnered with Zomato essentially,
Mm-hmm.
and we focus on addressing malnutrition. So I work again with the government itself
Mm-hmm.
at this nonprofit.
Okay, awesome. And how does GMAT sort of fit into this? So, what are your plans once you've
Yeah.
done
So
GMAT?
of course. So like I said, I've been working now for about 4.5 years. I feel like I'm reaching a crossroads stage in my career where now I need that sort of
Mm-hmm.
exponential growth, exposure, experience, etc. So that's where business school sort of came into the picture. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to also explore different sectors since I've now been in a certain space for a while. So I've been having these thoughts bubbling under the surface maybe over the
Mm-hmm.
past year. And I think writing the GMAT or getting into it, especially in the first attempt as well, was just a mental push in this direction. So now
Mm-hmm.
I plan to move ahead, apply to business school in the coming year, so for 2024. And yeah, hopefully this improvement serves me well in the future.
I'm sure. I'm sure. So, Gautam, you just brought up your first attempt. It's not like you had a bad score. You had a good score, but you were looking to improve, right, from a good to an excellent kind of a score. So, can you tell what's the importance of this improvement that you have seen in the score? How does it really help you in terms of your ability and to apply to schools of your choice or give you a fighting chance to get into that.
Right, right. So I think a lot of people who are watching this might resonate, but I come from an overrepresented background. Like as an Indian male, this is like one of the first things that you're told that, like if you see a school and you see that GMAT average is X, as an Indian male, you need to be X plus 10 or X plus 20. And this is just a memo that is passed down.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think so in my first attempt, I scored a 720. And I was fairly happy with that at that time. I was like, okay, fine, this should probably be in and around the averages,
Mm-hmm.
etc. But I hadn't been given this memo yet. So
Mm-hmm.
once I got that 720, then I started talking to people, and I really realized if I am aiming for, like, say, the top 10 to 15 global B schools, it is a possibly competitive score, but maybe it does not have that edge that I would require. So that's where that thinking came about, that I should give it another attempt, sort of recalibrate and see if I can push this up
Mm-hmm.
by anything 10, 20, 30 points, to be able to be more competitive. So I think that's where the idea came in. And I think now, having achieved going from 720 to 740, just having that push now, just re-looking which schools I want to apply to, I think it gives me that little bit more
Mm-hmm.
license to, say, be a little bit more ambitious with my choices, or feel a bit more secure with certain choices,
Mm-hmm.
etc.
I'm
So yeah.
I'm I'm really happy that the improvement has really helped you in targeting schools that maybe you didn't consider with your earlier score. That's really good to know. So tell me, when you got into this reattempt journey, what made you consider that yes, there has to be a change in the trajectory. One thing you did mention in verbal, you're going with more of a gut based approach, as in this sounds right or not. But what else were your considerations when you thought, okay, I have to maybe change the trajectory or the way I'm approaching the test?
I would say, just even in terms of pure mindset, like going into that previous test, I was like, if I get a 720, 730, I'll be fairly happy. Versus having gotten that, having locked that score down. So obviously I did certain things right in that first attempt as well to get that score. But then I guess this time, apart from my process, my whatever, like the preparation over the 2 months, I think a mindset shift as well. That
Mm-hmm.
you're not just happy with a 720, you want to push it, the sky is the limit, as such. They say, aim for the stars, you hit the tallest tree, right? Like, so this time I don't think I had that, like, I'll be happy with X or I'll be happy with Y. I was like, I need to optimize and try to get as high as I can, because it's
Mm-hmm.
going to help me in my larger goal. So I think just having that sort of feeling that, at least while preparing, not that no score would be enough, helped me, like just having that boundless ambition. Post the exam, of course, having the 740, I'm quite satisfied, etc. But I'm saying,
Mm-hmm.
while working, while preparing, I was just like, if not 730, 740, if not 740, 750. So it was just like a endless, nothing is enough sort of mentality, which maybe helped.
Mm. I think this is beautifully said because, I think mindset is almost as important as, the kind of effort that you put into the preparation. While we don't give it enough importance, that is, I would say, a game changer. So awesome. Now, in terms of where the improvement was going to come from, as you mentioned earlier, it was mostly in verbal, and your weak areas were SC and CR, right? So let's talk about that. So, what was that? How were you approaching SC questions earlier, and sort of what changed and what really helped, in really improving SC from an area that you weren't confident to a subsection that we're really confident in it.
Right, right. So I think, like, so just for context, I started with a V38, and in the exam I ended up with a V41. So as in, just getting that 3 point jump has really helped. It obviously accentuated my score, but I think the sort of formula behind that for me, as I alluded to in the beginning, was moving away from this gut-based approach, because I was so comfortable in
Mm-hmm.
the fact that, I feel I can read well, write well, etc. So I was like, verbal will happen. Like, I had
Mm-hmm.
this innate confidence the last time, and then when that score didn't reflect that, it was kind of, it really made me think.
Mm-hmm.
So then I went back to the drawing board this time. Of course, it was great to also work with eGMAT on this, work with you, have that direction being given throughout. Because I think eGMAT has a different approach towards the verbal section itself. So I had, like, that entire process sort of drilled into me from day one, that you take that, the fundamental, I forget what the first, master
Master
comprehension, right?
comprehension.
So you take that master comprehension, and that entire process driven approach is drilled in from day one. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that gave me the framework to attack verbal in a very different way. Because it's
Mm-hmm.
one thing to be like, okay, don't follow gut, you need to prepare in a different way, versus like, what is that way? And like, this is step one, this is step two, this is step three.
Mm-hmm.
And I think eGMAT did a great job with their a sort of verbal content in that way, where it really walks you through it in a certain way. And I felt like I grew with my skills grew along with the course. You know, I almost
Mm-hmm.
stripped down what I knew. I was like, I'm not going to follow my gut. I'm going to follow this. So it's like unlearning and then relearning. So
Yeah.
I think that was really really interesting. So I started with SC there, spent a good amount of time on SC because it was a weak area even in my
Mm-hmm.
previous attempt. So I think like based on my initial mock that I did on the
Mm-hmm.
eGMAT platform as well, like SC was highlighted as a key weak area. So I spent a good amount of time on SC following this process driven approach, and then built that into CR as well. And in a way, each of these things speak to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like once my approach in SC gets better, my comprehension of CR gets better. I understand some patterns that the GMAT exam follows in terms of setting traps for its students,
Mm-hmm.
baiting us with certain things. So then I understood what to look out for. So I think it was just a domino effect. I don't think if I just done CR in isolation, would it have gotten
Mm-hmm.
fixed?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not as effectively as just starting from master comprehension, even though you
Yeah.
feel like you know 70% of what they're saying in that session. But
Yeah.
that 30% really helped me with the next steps.
Very true. I think in GMAT, whether be it verbal or con, one of the key important things is how you read. You know, do that. You have to be really conscious when you're reading so that you get the meaning out of it. And that's where master comprehension, even though it goes back to the basics, really corrects thing at a basic level so that you can approach the questions in a better way.
Yeah.
So awesome. CR2, I think, while you mentioned SE was a challenge, CR also, were you also following a sort of a gut-based approach in CR? What was the approach earlier?
Yeah, so definitely, like I was following a gut-based approach. I had come across the concept of pre-thinking even before working with
Mm-hmm.
eGMAT, but I think like the way the curriculum sort of forced you to sort of meet that way of thinking, I
Mm-hmm.
think that was really helpful because you think about it as an abstract concept,
Mm-hmm.
that this technique of pre-thinking in a particular question, and there's a good approach in CR. And I had read that, but I don't think I'd inculcated it as
Mm-hmm.
well
Mm-hmm.
in my previous attempt versus now, like just as an automated process, like if you give me a
Mm-hmm.
CR question right now, also, this is how I would approach it just because it got drilled in over multiple attempts. And
Mm-hmm.
I think I really like the section where, the learning. I forget what the term is, but before the sectional final test that you have, you also have that the other test, right? Where we get to solve a question and then you show us the video analysis
The
of how it's
application file.
yeah, the application files, right? So I think that really helped me where I spent a lot of time on the application files where I would do a question, then I'd be like, okay, I got it right, but it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't in the way I'm supposed to be doing it. So then you go back and almost re-look that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those helped me a lot in sort of honing the techniques that I was supposed to use.
Yeah, I think that's really well said because you mentioned that you had a lot of unlearning to do too, right?
Right.
And given that when you are learning, you're trying to learn foundations or course correct the way you approach, you start with sort of easier questions, right? And when you're working with easier, medium kind of questions, it's easy to go back to your original process of solving the questions.
Yeah.
Then there's no learning. So what you said, you would sort of cross check against not just whether your answer was right, but also whether you use the right process to get to the right answer. I think that really helps you make that process, as you rightly said, into something sort of second nature to you, right?
Right.
So that's really good. So tell me, in terms of pre-thinking, when you say you knew about it, how but you never used it as such during the process. How easy or difficult was it to now unlearn and pick up a new way of approaching a particular question?
Right. So I think again I would go back to what I was talking about the master comprehension bit, where I think apart from teaching you those certain concepts at the beginning, it also just forced me to unlearn in a
Mm-hmm.
way because it just kept drilling down like that we would have to follow certain methods and frameworks to solve these problems. And I think I was also in a mind space which was open to that. I realized that gut instinct model was not working. So it's about a mental switch now to not just listen to your gut. That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean to like eliminate it completely. It will always have a role, especially in verbal, I think. But the idea is to let the framework reach you to an answer and let your gut back up that answer
Mm-hmm.
rather than leading with your gut. So I think that switch happened right at the master comprehension stage. So by the time I had reached the CR section, of course, it came with its own challenges.
Mm-hmm.
There were a couple of, like, for example, with bold-faced questions, I realized I was taking a little longer. They were slightly more complicated, etc. But that really made me realize as well what I was doing wrong the last time, right? Because when I used to come across bold-faced last time, I wouldn't take as long because I wasn't following an entire sort of framework or an approach. I was just
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, fine, like these are the two boldface. What is the equation between it? And going on my first principle sort of thinking, I would select a choice. So the fact that I needed that more time showed me that I'm following a process to reach this answer,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why it's happening. So then instead of fixing the process, I just need to fix how much time I'm taking on it.
Yes.
Which yeah.
True. I think the beauty of a process-driven approach is you know that you can replicate that particular score that you get because it's all about following the process day in and day out and just being able to um, replicate it on the test day too. And I think the proof is in that V41 that you scored on the test day, right? So, Gautam, you fixed your two major areas of weaknesses. RC was already stronger, if I remember right, and you had great accuracy in RC. And then it was about moving to the test readiness and mocks, right? So before that, I think before getting into that bit, I would really want to understand. I know that you placed a lot of emphasis on the strategic review, on error log, right? So would you want to share with our viewers how did you approach that and how did that really help you go from that good to best?
Right, right. So I think there are two parts here. One is like the way eGMAT breaks down each section. Like so say there's a topic area like modifiers, then it's broken down, broken down into parts of like four or five, and you don't look at modifiers as the entire block and be like it's a strong area or weak area. You're like out of these five now, I'm actually good at these three, and these
Mm-hmm,
are the two weak areas. So I think it really helps compartmentalize different topic areas for me and highlight what I need to work on. So that's where the strategic reviews as well came in, where then it wasn't everything's not looked at as a block that, if modifiers isn't good, you need to redo modifiers. It's more like within modifiers, there's a
mm-hmm,
particular topic, spend more time on that, maybe rewatch a couple of the modules there, and then come back to it. So I think just doing that entire process, as well as then doing the cementing, which sort of re-drills it in and re-emphasizes on certain topics and lets you bring in these different skills together, right? Because
mm-hmm,
solving it when you learn a topic and you're like applying it immediately is one thing, but when it's all sort of coming together, it's a good test. So I think just that entire process of review, rework, review again, rework again, it's iterative, but
mm-hmm,
it fixes your fundamentals in a very logical manner.
mm-hmm,
It
mm-hmm.
doesn't leave things to chance. So I think I really like that. And with the error log as well, as in that's an essential piece of that. And like at the beginning, again, I wasn't as good with the error log, I would say, for the first few weeks. And then I was having a few problems with, say, clearing some of the cementing with SC or CR sections, right? And that really pushed me to go back to my error log. I was keeping one, but I wasn't as disciplined about it, or
Mhm,
maybe not
mhm,
filling it out as well. I was doing it as a piece of homework that I was being given,
mhm,
like grudgingly, versus then realizing that, like this is a database for me to look at my own. It's like looking in the mirror and like you getting an insight into what are your test taking habits,
mhm.
what's going wrong, spotting patterns, because then now that data is all coming together
Yeah.
in a longer list. So and also the error log, I would say another thing that I didn't even think of at the time, but was really useful later on, was coming back to it when I was doing my revision, say 2 3 weeks later. Also, it was easy for me to like touch base with SC or CR, just looking at it and looking at the error log,
Mhm,
because that's a quick reference point now, because now I've looked at those same problems maybe 15 20 times. So you look at them, resolve it, you go and resolve your mistake questions, and then you get that insight that, now you fixed your process, you almost see that question, you remember what mistake you had also
yeah.
made, why you had made it, and what is the correct answer. So it was almost a memory exercise by the end. But I think that also really helped fix my process in my head.
That's very well put, right? It not just acts as a guide to show you where you're going wrong, but also keeps an account of where you faltered, what corrective actions that you took, so that you can come back to it at a later date in the form of a revision. It's like a concise kind of notes that you're referring to. right?
Right.
So awesome. And as I was talking earlier, so we come to the test readiness bit of it and the mocks. I know that the first mock didn't go exactly as planned. The score improved. There was no score improvement, to just put it bluntly. So, what was your feeling after that? After having put in all the effort and the first mock didn't go especially well. So, how did you take it?
Right. So I got a 720 again in the first mock, and I was a bit underwhelmed to an extent. But what comforted me at that point was I had not yet put enough time in quant at all, like in terms of even reaching my old level. I had not done
Mm-hmm.
that yet. I had not put in the time I needed to. I'd focused a lot on verbal since that was the weak area. And since my verbal score did get pushed up in that particular mock, and my quant was what was holding me back, I was still a little comfortable because I knew that now I have worked a lot on verbal. So if I had not, that had not reflected, I would have been disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
But with
Mm-hmm.
quant, I knew that I can revert to my old levels. I just needed that 7-10 days of just time with quant, with the material, just getting back to my basics and getting up to the usual level.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that
Yeah,
gave me a lot of comfort and confidence that it wasn't, if I'd got that same 720 but with a different score split, maybe it would have been different.
yeah.
But yeah.
I know. I remember back to our conversation after that mock when you said the good thing about how you took it was you took it as a learning opportunity. Didn't make it, everything, but you had particular things that you wanted to look for in that mock. You took your wins there and figured out where else to improve and really worked on it. Right? I think that is why you take mocks, just to understand what other aspects do you need to work on post the uh, you know post preparing and going through the entire cycle of improvement. So that's really really good. The next mock went well, and I remember this conversation before your test when you did mention that going into the test you have this generally you have this really positive mindset. You're not anxious or nervous. So tell me, how do you manage that? Because it's a high stakes exam, right? And you have spent so much time, effort, money, sweat, all of these things on this exam. So
Yeah.
how do you manage to stay calm and give it your all on the testing?
So I wouldn't say that I don't get nervous or anxious. I feel like that would be a reach. It's more about like controlling that. I feel like some amount of nerves is
Mm-hmm,
good. Like they say that if you don't feel butterflies in your stomach, also there's something wrong. That means because it is a high stakes exam, I have to be in that mindset that I'm giving it adequate
mm-hmm,
importance. And if I don't feel any butterflies, that means it's not being given that importance. So I wouldn't say I wasn't nervous or anxious, but
mm-hmm,
it's about I tried to keep that in control. And it's something we spoke about a little earlier about like the what you tell yourself, right? Like essentially like being like our brains are moldable in that sense. So if you tell yourself that you are going to do well on this exam because you feel equipped and you reinforce that in your head, then
mm-hmm,
on exam day there's a different attitude versus if you tell yourself that XYZ is my weak area and I hope I don't get challenging questions there, etc. Then that is what is the background
mm-hmm,
noise in your head when you're going to the exam. So I just try to steer away from that. It's not like today I don't have a weak area, today I don't have whatever, some question that I don't want to see on that exam. But if I fixate on that, that question might not even come, and my
mm-hmm.
other 30 questions also will be impacted by it.
Yeah.
So that's how I try to like sort of steer away from that mindset.
So channel your energy into thinking only positives, in
Yeah,
believing that you can do it, right? So,
exactly.
on the test day, while you were taking test, so what was your approach? As in, did you understand? Yes, the test is going well, or were there any test taking kind of a challenges? So what was the test day like?
Test day was fairly good. I'd given this exam, like I said, like I'd given it 6 months ago or so, and in the same center. So I think just doing it in the same center, like it still felt like semi-familiar environment,
Mm-hmm,
etc. So that was one change from the first time when it's more nerves because
mm-hmm,
you're there and you don't have any score in hand, etc. Now I felt a bit more secure that I have a score in hand. I'm trying to build on it. I know the center. So I think I came to the center itself with a better mindset. So even
mm-hmm,
for a first time test taker, I would say my mistake at that time was just not having a calm mindset, having a bit more, not
mm-hmm,
nervous, but being a bit amped up
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
mindset. So this time I tried to purposefully sort of approach it in a different way. I also took the exam at a different time. So like I'm not a morning person. I had taken
mm-hmm,
the exam I got a slot in the morning the previous time. Maybe even that had played into it. So this time I took a slot that worked for me. So, optimized for a lot of these
Mm-hmm.
intangibles that led to me starting question one in a better mind space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, then through the exam, honestly, the GMAT, I can never understand how it scores, even if I write it five more times. So you just have a broad idea that it's going in a good direction or a bad direction. I don't think anyone, like even maybe you who's seen so many students, if you could see it live, you couldn't be able to predict
Yeah.
like what score someone's going to get. You get an idea, the plus minus 20 range, that something is going in a certain direction. So I did have that my verbal section went fairly well. And I think a lot of our conversations about also test taking strategy helped there, where you spoke about attacking the initial blocker questions, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
since the exam's adaptive, and if I'm doing well, it would likely get harder throughout the section. So I think that strategy helped as well. That's not something that I had practiced before working with you. And so I followed that to a T, honestly, like where I really attacked the first 15, 17 questions in both sections. So that worked
Mm-hmm.
out pretty such that towards the end, then I had a bit of time in hand to deal with the harder
Mm-hmm.
questions.
Mm-hmm.
I think like just following that approach, it did help me. Obviously, there would be those few questions which trip you up. I think that's if you're doing well, you are going to face 700, 750
Yeah.
level questions, and that will happen. So again, another tip that you had shared with me, where like the exam takes two questions to adjust your level again. So if you mess up one question, you don't need to let it impact the second question. So I think that was a really good tip you shared with me, where sometimes you know that you've taken a bit of a 50-50 guess. You've got it down to two choices, but you are unsure. But then I really practice that, take a deep breath. This is the next question. Why should I let the entire, like, whatever, the next question, which I know really suffer based on this? So, yeah.
That's awesome. So I'm glad it all fell into place, and really,
Yeah.
really happy that this, as I said, this score gives you a fighting chance to get into your dream schools. So Gautam, just to wrap it up, do you have any key tips that you want to share with all the other GMAT aspirants out there who are also looking to ace the GMAT and have a really good score?
Yeah, yeah. So key tips, I would say, like, one, as in going back to what I said in the start, I think, like, for me personally, that was my biggest takeaway about like the approach to verbal and deep diving into each like sort of English theory area.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas earlier you have a more broad strokes approach. So I realized that does not work at all. So I feel like even for people who are very comfortable in the language, really deep dive. So that really helps. I would say apart from that, even with quant or any other area, unlike other competitive exams, which really allow you to, maybe because they have negative marking, they allow you to skip a question here and there. So your weak areas, you can sort of be like, okay, I won't work as much on them.
Mm-hmm.
Versus with GMAT, it's very unforgiving that way, since it's adaptive. You can't just be like, like, say for me with quant, it's like geometry is not a good area for me. So in another exam, maybe I'd just be like, leave geometry. I'll just study the basics. If I get an easy question, it's okay. Versus with GMAT, I didn't want to take that approach. So really spend time on your weaknesses. So obviously keep your strengths secure, but spend a good amount of time on your weaknesses. You want to feel like you have less chinks in your armor as possible going into your exam. And then the third thing, I think, would just be mindset, honestly. Like, just
Mm-hmm.
how you approach it, just try to just tell yourself that it's going to go well. And I feel like more often than not, if you slowly start to believe it. You can lie to yourself, honestly,
Yeah.
fake it till you make it. We all do that. So you just slowly, like, as long as you're putting in the work, then keep lying to yourself, and eventually you will believe it, and eventually it will be true as well. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure this mindset will come really handy when you get into the application cycle and the admissions rounds and all that.
yeah,
So
yeah.
here's wishing you the best of luck for the upcoming application cycle and the admission rounds. I'm sure you'll get into the school that you want to get in. And thank you again for being here today. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Rashmi. Yeah, I hope so. Fingers crossed. And thanks so much for your help as well through this process. It was really great working closely with you. You kept me accountable throughout. And yeah, like, I had a great time.
Pleasure has been mine. So thanks again and congratulations. Bye bye.
Bye bye.